Welcome back to another explainer. So, have you ever stared at a completely blank page, trying to describe a vibrant, bustling scene, only to find yourself, well, entirely paralyzed by writer's block? You know exactly what the location looks like in your head, right? But translating that massive, complex image into words feels completely overwhelming. It's such a common problem for us. We try to capture the whole shebang all at once, and honestly, it usually results in flat, lifeless writing. Well, today we're going to dismantle that barrier and show you exactly how to construct a living, breathing world on the page.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here's a brilliant, highly practical strategy from our source material on descriptive writing. Instead of trying to swallow the whole elephant, you just break it down. As this quote perfectly captures, one way to do it is by generating pictures. Bit by bit, you can write a convincing description. Today, we're going to look at how a student writer took a series of individual, fragmented visual pictures of a beach and actually stitched them together into an incredibly rich narrative. We're going to deconstruct their methodology, literally sense by sense.
All right, Section 1, Writing Bit by Bit.
Let's set up the blank canvas of our beach story. Put yourself right in this environment. If you were standing on that hot sand, staring up at those colorful umbrellas, how exactly would you describe this searing, sunny environment? I mean, most of us might just write, "It was a sunny day at the beach, and the sun was hot." Sure, it's factually accurate, but it completely lacks imagination, doesn't it? It definitely doesn't make the reader feel that intense heat radiating right off the ground.
But look at how our student writer handled it. They didn't just describe the sun, they described the people reacting to the sun. They wrote that beachgoers hid like vampire bats from the full glare of the sun, hoping to avoid adding a rose lobster tinge to their skins. Spotlighting these vivid metaphors instantly elevates the prose. Comparing ordinary sunbathers hiding under parasols to vampire bats and an impending sunburn to a rose lobster tinge, that paints an immediate, highly relatable, and frankly hilarious picture in the reader's mind. You just instantly understand the intensity of the light.
Moving right along to Section 2, Painting the Searing Scene. Let's keep building our setting here. We have a young woman with sunglasses applying coconut oil on the beach, with the beautiful, sparkling ocean and clouds right behind her. So we firmly established the heat, but how do we translate this serene atmosphere into truly engaging text? Now, what's really interesting about this is the stark contrast between a basic action-focused description and a lush, atmospheric expansion. A beginner might just write the short action, "A gentle breeze swept sand." Easy enough, but look at the student's expanded text. They describe the clouds as bleached white cotton wool clouds meandering like a flock of lost sheep. They describe the ocean as an endless gradation of color, starting as lapis, becoming a brilliant, glittering sapphire. They turned a simple environmental detail into an absolute masterclass of color and atmosphere. The scene goes from flat to vividly three-dimensional.
Up next, Section 3, Adding Action and Sound.
Of course, a truly immersive scene needs way more than just pretty sights. I mean, a silent movie is great, but a movie with fantastic sound design? That is unforgettable. It requires dynamic movement and noise. Imagine this tall, thin man stretching out and hurling a stone into the bright blue water. Listen carefully for the auditory words the writer uses to bring this highly energetic moment to life.
Let's break down this specific sensory vocabulary. The writer doesn't just say the man threw a rock. Nope, they say he twitched and jerked, he was coughing loudly and snorting. He hurled a stone making a plop sound, which could be heard over the swishing waves. Showing how words like plop and swishing are used immediately engages the reader's ears. You aren't just watching this man from a distance, you are hearing the exact, slightly awkward noises he makes.
And this brilliantly illustrates how a simple simile creates a memorable, instant micro-narrative. The writer describes him as having been splayed out on the beach like a dead stick insect. I love that. That one single line tells you everything you need to know about his posture, his scrawny build, and the almost comical way he was relaxing before abruptly jumping up to throw the stone. It's incredibly evocative and anchors the character perfectly.
Moving to Section 4, Engaging Smell and Texture.
We've covered sight and sound, but now we're tackling what are arguably the hardest senses to capture effectively in writing: smell and physical texture. Direct your attention to the distinct, contrasting elements sitting next to each other on the sand here. On one side, you have a man with a bottle of natural jojoba oil, and right at his feet, there's a scavenging seagull digging its beak into a greasy fast food paper bag.
So, the crucial point is how isolating specific tactile and olfactory words makes the scene viscerally, almost uncomfortably real to the reader. The writer uses phrases like rubbing oil into flabby skin. They describe the oily odors spilling out and infecting the breeze with the aroma of fast food. By intentionally tapping into these potent, slightly clashing smells and textures, the writer pulls you right onto the beach towel. You can practically smell that heavy mix of sweet oil and salty French fries.
All right, Section 5, Connecting the Narrative. Now that we have all these rich fragments, the heat, the colors, the sounds, the smells, how do we stitch them together without it sounding like just a random grocery list? Well, a skilled writer builds momentum by connecting the action smoothly from one subject to the next. Let's see how this builds by tracking our literal wingman, the seagull. We start by looking down at the bird investigating the bag on the sand, and then we follow its flight straight up into the sprawling azure sky. The writer uses the bird's natural movement to elegantly shift the reader's gaze right away from the crowded, messy beach.
And I really want to highlight how all that rich, complex, messy description we just waded through suddenly distills down to a perfectly simple geometric image. The writer notes that, as the bird rose, it was soon merely a black V shape against the background of a white, fluffy cloud. It acts like a cinematic zoom-out. It gives the reader a moment to breathe and appreciate the vastness of the setting.
Bringing us to Section 6, the final descriptive masterpiece.
Okay. We've gathered all our puzzle pieces, and now we're bringing all these disparate sensory bits together for the final touch of our beach scene. Remember our friend from earlier? We're reintroducing our stick insect character to show how referencing previous elements creates tight narrative cohesion. We aren't just looking at random beachgoers anymore. We're in a lived-in, cohesive world where the same characters exist and interact over time. Our stick insect is now back on his towel, toasting under the glare.
And for our final descriptive layer, I want to point out how the writer uses sharp physical discomfort to really ground the scene. The character is toasting his thin body. He wriggled uncomfortably, with his bones jutting into sand riddled with sharp, pointed, and even jagged shells. This creates a striking, brilliant contrast to the soft, white, luxurious sand we experienced at the very beginning of the scene. It reminds us that every environment has physical texture, both pleasant and painful, which just makes the world feel incredibly authentic.
And that brings us to the end of our world-building masterclass. So what pictures will you generate for your next story? I challenge you to take this bit-by-bit sensory technique, focusing on sight, sound, smell, and texture, one image at a time, and apply it to your very next writing endeavor. Don't let the blank page intimidate you. Just start with one picture and build from there. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.